It is then when a quiet that is so thick that it practically hums. A stillness that is not external to you, but inner to you. One does not hear thunder or receive a warning. Rather, it is accompanied by a gentle unwinding. When you wake up one morning, you notice that something has changed. You are not carrying a larger load. Rather, it is no longer something that can be ignored. It is not that the smile you wear is painful. Rather, it is that it is sticking less. You continue to function, continue to act, and continue to move through your commitments like choreography. But something sacred is beginning to quiver within you. Is it possible that it started after yet another night of pretending? Perhaps the moment you swallowed your truth for the 100th time in order to safeguard the comfort of another person was the beginning of it. Possibly it began the very first time you said yes, despite the fact that your body was screaming no. You do not know the precise time that the thread broke, but you are aware that it happened as a result of the fact that you are no longer able to lie to yourself without bleeding. Throughout your entire existence, you have been every single thing to every single person. The art of shape-shifting is something you have mastered. You are the one who has always been the one who is dependable, the one who is kind, and the one who is silent. In order to prevent disagreement, you have folded your boundaries into an origami shape. Having emotionally abandoned yourself, you have constructed relationships on a basis that is highly unstable. It has been said that fatigue is a virtue. It is anxiousness that you have termed ambition. In your mind, serenity is synonymous with silence. Your soul is now knocking, and it is not doing so in a kind or gentle manner. It is asking to be remembered, and it is hammering on the door of your chest until you pay attention. When Carl Jung talked about the self, he was referring to the original, frameless self that dwells beneath the persona. This is what he meant. That deeper part of you that has never asked to be pleasing, who has never accepted to be on the smaller side, and who has never given their agreement to wearing a mask. That portion of you that is aware of the distinction between safety and suppression that you possess. That half of you that has been holding out hope that you will finally return home. Not burnout, but a soul quake, a tremor deep within a mind that shakes free all the lies you had to believe in order to survive, is what you are experiencing right now. The fallacy that your value is contingent on the opinions of other people. That love is something that must be earned. It is a fallacy that your requirements make you feeble. The misconception that remaining silent is a sign of maturity. Jung noted that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. And how long has it been since you were honest with yourself? Not with other people, but with yourself? For what length of time have you been adjusting your reality to fit the perspective of another person? How much time have you spent editing your soul to fit it into spaces that were never intended to hold it? And now, as you stand here in silence, there's only one question that matters. What would happen if you prioritize yourself above all else? In no uncertain terms, not in the future, but right now, without any remorse whatsoever. The idea of putting oneself ahead of everything else may sound radical, and it probably is. This is especially true for someone who has been taught from infancy to do the opposite. This is especially true for someone whose neurological system has been taught that love is contingent, that presence must be earned, and that your very existence is an excessive amount of responsibility. Because you have internalized these lessons to such an extent that they have become law, putting yourself first suddenly feels like a betrayed. But to whom exactly? With regard to what? You are not betraying your people when you choose to be yourself. Rather, you are betraying the system that has informed you that your requirements are not important. You go against the legacy of martyrdom that has been handed down from generation to generation. A betrayal of the silence that put you in a tiny position. It is in that act of treachery that something sacred is initiated. It is true that your ego will reject you as you start. The reason it will scream and claw is because it has been educated to believe that familiarity is synonymous with safety. It will tell you that choosing yourself is a selfish act, that healing is an indulgent act, that you do not deserve rest until you have demonstrated something, and that people will leave you before you succeed. The fact of the matter is that they could. However, If they do, you should give them permission to leave, since anyone who leaves you once you stop abandoning yourself was never loving you. Rather, they were loving the version of you that did abandon yourself. The task at hand is not to maintain them. Rather, it is to regain your sense of wholeness. And what does it look like when one is complete? This does not appear to be an ideal situation. It does not appear to be a state of perpetual tranquility or unending optimism. When you are at your most vulnerable, it is important to sit with yourself and tell yourself, I will not abandon you again. This is what it means to be whole. It is also important to allow tears to fall without running away from them. Allowing anger to speak, not with the intention of hurting other people, but rather to hear the parts of you that were never allowed to roar, is what it appears to be. It appears as though you are breaking a generational curse simply by declaring, no more. It appears as though you are not responding to the message that pulls you back into a version of yourself that you have outgrown. This appears to be a time spent alone, not because you are experiencing feelings of loneliness, but rather because you're finally learning to take pleasure in your own company. Because this is the first time in your life that you're not trying to escape yourself, but rather the first time that you are facing yourself. It appears as though you are letting the discomfort of stillness to remain without numbing it. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. You have been acting from the state of unconscious pain for years, selecting people who reflect your lack of worthiness, pursuing dreams that were never yours, and attaching yourself to identities that were designed for survival rather than for truth. Your body was not broken. Rather, you were sleeping. And now, slowly and painfully, but without a doubt, you are beginning to awaken. It is important to keep in mind that your existence was never intended to be a performance, that you were never intended to persuade anyone of your value, and that you are not here to play a role. Rather, you are here to embody a soul. The soul does not engage in competition, it does not compare itself to others, and it does not demand attention. When you're ready to listen, it waits patiently and forever, whispering, until you're ready to hear it. Moreover, you're now. For this reason, everything in your immediate environment appears to be falling apart. Consequently, the dreams that you once adhered to now feel burdensome to you. Because of this, the relationship that you believed would last forever suddenly feels like it is suffocating you. Because it was never built by your soul, the life you made with such pride now feels like a cage. This is because it was built by your survival mechanisms, and your soul was never involved in its construction. Your soul has outgrown the house that your ego created for you to protect you, and now it wants to fly. Your ego built the house. Hey, but just to broaden. Nevertheless, the fall comes before the flight. The collapse comes before the rebirth. And here's the phase that no one prepares you for. The in-between, the area where the old has been removed but the new has not yet arrived. It is the emptiness, as a period of fall into the unconscious, during which the ego begins to disintegrate and the actual self begins to emerge. Jung referred to this experience as the night sea journey. The area is solitary, it is terrible, and it is holy because it is here that you come face to face with aspects of yourself that you had forgotten existed. The young girl who was told that her requirements were excessive is introduced to you. You meet the young person who has learned to smile despite experiencing suffering. You come face to face with the grown-up who has been clenching their hands and keeping everything together. Also, you do not attempt to escape from them this time. One must take a seat, listen, and then forgive. This is not a sign of weakness. Rather, it is the most brave thing you can do. To sit with your darkness without attempting to solve it, to let the storm run through your body without opposing it, and to allow sadness to arrive in waves without demanding that it explain itself. This is healing, not as a goal but as a return, not as an accomplishment, but rather as a reminder of what came before. The realization that you are not your past experiences, your habits, or your errors is a reminder that you are not your trauma. You have been a witness to everything that has happened, and because of this, you are free. However, there is a price that must be paid for freedom. The cost includes everything that kept you tied, including the notion that you had to earn love, the story that stated you had to be small in order to be secure, and the mask that made everyone else feel comfortable. These will all request that you come back. Through the use of familiarity, they will entice you. They will offer you comfort, but comfort is not the same thing as peace, and you will have to make choices over and over again. Choose the truth over comfort. Choose growth over approval. Choose depth over performance. And choose yourself, especially when it is difficult. But it will be challenging. Some days you will find yourself longing for the numbness. Other days you will feel envious of people who continue to sleepwalk through life. And still other days you will question whether or not the suffering is worth it. And when you are experiencing those days, I want you to keep this in mind. You are not insane. You are awakening. You have broken decades of quiet with your actions. Unlearning generations of suppression is what you are doing. As you navigate a world that thrives on your self-doubt, you are creating a new path for yourself. Undoubtedly, it is painful, and it is unquestionably weighty. But the burden that you are carrying is not only yours. It is inherited from your ancestors. Not only are you mending your own life, but you're also healing the lineage that came before you and the lineage that will come after you when you choose to be yourself. This is a legacy. It is not leadership in the sense that the world understands it. Rather, it is leadership in the sense that the soul requires it. Truth, presence, and honesty are more important than titles or acclaim when it comes to your success. To take the lead, you must choose yourself. You lead by being the first person in your family to say, "I will not pass this pain on." You lead by doing the inner work that no one else was willing to do. And the impact of that is tremendous, appearing imperceptible at first, but lasting forever. This is what it means to follow the path of individuation. To remove every layer that was never you. To confront your fears not with opposition, but with reverence. And to say yes to everything you are afraid of. It is not simple, but it is sacred. And it is yours, and only yours, to say goodbye to yourself in a world that benefits from your refusal to do something. There is no one who can walk it for you, but I can guarantee that you will never feel more alive than you do when you walk it. And I don't mean just walk it. The reason is not that life becomes simpler, but rather that you finally feel like you belong to yourself. Being a part of yourself not only alters the way you perceive the world, but it also alters the way the world reacts to you. As a result of the fact that you're no longer deferring to permission, you are experiencing presence. You're no longer merely putting on a show, you are actually breathing it. At this point, you're no longer negotiating your value based on how other people perceive you. Rather, you have finally established a firm foundation in the unwavering knowledge that you are permitted to exist totally, loudly, and without apology. You did not remember you because someone else thought you were worthy. Rather, you remembered yourself. You were able to recall that you were complete before you were molded by ideas, before you were damaged by expectations, and before you were taught to shrink. Back when they instructed you to be pleasant rather than honest, accommodating rather than genuine, and invisible rather than powerful, you had the freedom to do whatever you wanted. Even now, that freedom is still present within you. The only thing that has happened is that it has been buried behind the noise, the indoctrination, the roles, and the humiliation. It has not died. However, excavation has started at this point. Every time you drain yourself by saying no to something, you dig deeper. When you give your truth a name, you become aware of additional truths. Every time you choose to take a break rather than rush, that you choose to feel rather than fix, that you choose to cry rather than deal, you reveal her. She is the original you, the wild, unafraid, and totally alive self that was never absent but only withdrawn. When Jung referred to the self as both a destination and an origin, he was primarily referring to this concept. This is not something that you create. Rather, it is something that you discover. And once you are exposed, you will never be able to go back to being the person you were pretending to be. However, the world that surrounds you may attempt to draw you back, not because it is malicious, but rather because it has been accustomed to going without you. They're accustomed to you disappearing into the requirements of other people. It has become accustomed to you answering yes when you actually wanted to answer no. It has been accustomed to your cooperation, your caretaking, and your tranquility. And now, As you start to pull yourself up, the entire globe might shake. Your limits will make some individuals feel as though they are in danger. Some others will accuse you of being self-centered about your development. There are those who will attempt to push you back into roles that you have outgrown. Let them, because it is not your obligation to worry about how they will react. It is your obligation to bring yourself back into alignment, to the truth, to integrity, and to the version of yourself who refuses to give up her own serenity in order to maintain the illusion of peace for other people. However, this is where things start to get serious. Due to the fact that growth creates space, this is the point at which feelings of loneliness can strike like a tsunami. The distance that separates you from the person you used to be. This distance separates you from those individuals who continue to profit from your disempowerment. There's a distance between you and the world that you created while you were ignoring yourself. Not only does that area have the potential to feel like grief, but it is grief. Feelings of sorrow for the years that you deceived yourself and lost. While you were hungry for genuine connection, you were grieving the love that you received. A sense of regret for the stillness that you mistaken for maturity. Feelings of sorrow for all the times you try to make do with less. Some people are at ease, yet grieving is a sacred experience as well. It is the fire that gets rid of the untrue in order to make room for the truth to emerge. It is important to allow it to rise, even if it causes pain. Even when the voice in your head tells you that you are too much, even when the past trauma tells you that you will be left if you choose yourself, even when the body shakes with fear at the thought of being alone, let it rise. When you give yourself permission to be totally present with your truth, you are rewriting the story. Allow it to rise because of this phenomenon. When you reinvent the meaning of love, you rewrite the meaning of success, and you rewrite the meaning of healing itself. These days, it is no longer about being digestible, it is no longer about being remarkable, and it is no longer about getting selected. It is about being complete, and completeness encompasses everything. The anger, the love, the mistakes, and the wonders. Being whole means that you do not need to work for your position. You are already a part of it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. However, privilege does not equal easy. Rather, it entails sacred obligation. Because of this, it is your job to stop performing, to stop hiding, and to stop betraying your own soul in order to be accepted by other people who have forgotten their own. In this holy rebellion, you're not rebelling against the world, but rather rebelling for your own becoming. It is true that it will destroy the life that you have constructed for the purpose of surviving, but it will make way for the life that you were destined to live. In addition, that existence is initially more peaceful since it is not constructed on loudness. Rather, it is constructed on depth. Long pauses, deep breaths, and open and honest discourse are the foundations of this thing. It is constructed on solitude that is not isolating but rather nourishing. Instead of harboring resentment for your development, it is built on connections that honor it. Rather of relying on acceptance, it is built on innovation that originates from genuineness. It is constructed on love that does not require you to become smaller. And when you live from this place, you do not become magnetic because you are attempting to attract others. Rather, you become magnetic because you are no longer trying to repel yourself. These are the results that you get when you prioritize yourself above anything else. You stop being outwardly focused and instead begin to focus within. This means that you cease pleading with life to come to your rescue and instead begin to come to your own rescue. The moment you give up trying to force alignment, you are able to achieve alignment. Furthermore, life does not disregard that. Rather, life reacts to it. It is not because you have demonstrated your value that it makes its way to you. Rather, it is because you have finally ceased doubting it. Mostly due to the fact that you have now realized that you do not receive what you want, but rather what you are. And when you stop betraying yourself, you will experience a change in who you are. When you start living not from the expectations that have been placed upon you, but from the truth that has always been a part of you, you start to notice things. For example, the way your body softens around people who see you clearly, the way your energy lifts in places where you're not required to explain yourself, and the way your creativity flows when you're no longer trying to be good, but only real. You start to feel liberated in situations that used to make you feel as though you were being suffocated. Your fear of the talk has transformed into a barrier that you are now able to maintain with grace. You are now able to say no with confidence to the invitation that you used to accept out of guilt. Once you're accustomed to dread, it transforms into a reflection that you can look at with open eyes. However, this transition is not only about altering behaviors, it is also about letting go of identities. Because you are losing the old you, the one who is able to perform, who pleased, who tolerated, and who demonstrated its worth. And the death of one's ego is not a little matter. A feeling of annihilation is present. The sensation is similar to that of being exposed in front of the entire world with nothing to hide behind. The experience is comparable to wandering through a forest that is on fire and coming to the realization that the flames represent your own truth, devouring all that is not you. Jung referred to this process as individuation, which he used to describe the act of letting go of the false self and bringing forth the genuine self. Not in theory, but in your bones, in your blood, in your neurological system, and in the choices you make. Moreover, you reinforce that birth each time you choose the truth over something that is familiar to you. Become more of who you are. On top of that, duty comes along with that becoming, mostly due to the fact that you can no longer pretend. When your soul is famished, you can no longer continue to be there. Relationships that are draining on you are no longer something you can accept. It is no longer possible for you to work occupations that quiet you. It is no longer acceptable for you to wear masks that suffocate you. Now, you have an excessive amount of knowledge. You are aware of what is going on behind the scenes. And even if your head tells you to go back, your body is aware that there is no turning back. There is only onward, into the unknown, into the terrible, magnificent, and expansive unknown of who you truly are. There is no other way. Here is where a lot of folks give up, because this is the point where things start to get challenging. It is at this point that comfort comes to an end and consciousness begins. It is inevitable that you will misplace stuff along this route. You're going to lose connections with those who only like the version of you that did not love yourself. You will no longer have the experience of being certain. The coping techniques that were formerly able to keep you afloat will be lost to you. On the other hand, you will acquire something much more valuable: presence, aliveness, and peace. The kind of peace that comes from no longer being in conflict with oneself, as opposed to the kind of peace that comes from avoiding conflict or avoiding conflict altogether. Not the kind of happiness that results from keeping a positive attitude all the time, but rather the kind that results from being honest about everything. It is the kind that claims, I am able to suppress my anger and still choose compassion. While I am grieving, I am able to remain appreciative. I am able to feel fear and still move forward. This is what it means to be emotionally mature. This is what we mean by psychological completeness. Now is the time to get back to oneself. Additionally, the self does not have to persuade anyone else. There is no requirement for it to win arguments, demonstrate its value, or achieve followership. It is the case. That is sufficient. When you live from that state of being, you attract other people who also live from that state of being. Individuals who come face to face with you without any disguises. Folks who aren't terrified of the depths you've reached. On the other hand, individuals who appreciate your boundaries rather than penalizing you for them. People who are able to say, I see you, and truly mean it. These soul connections are extremely rare and holy, and they are not the result of performance, but rather of genuine presence. As a result of two complete individuals choosing to be with one another without the need to fill a void in their lives. It is in these interactions, whether romantic or otherwise, that you are able to recover in ways that neither a book nor a therapist could ever. In light of the fact that nothing is more therapeutic than being totally seen while still being loved. But before you can be seen in its whole, you must first perceive yourself. Inwardly, with complete and utter candor, you are required to confront the aspects of yourself that you have judged, denied, and banished. The portion that continues to have feelings of unworthiness, the portion that undermines positive things, and the portion that is so terrified of being abandoned that it would rather leave first. Not because the shadow is a malevolent force, but rather because it is unconscious. Jung referred to this work as shadow labor. It is impossible to integrate something that is unconscious. Rather, it must be brought into the light. And attention is the light that shines. There is sympathy in the light. The message that the light is conveying is, I will no longer run away from you. I will sit with you. I will learn your name. I will offer you presence instead of punishment. This is not a flashy or Instagrammable statement. It is not compatible with a self-help structure that consists of 5 steps. The process is sloppy, it is unprocessed, it is holy, and it is slow. In addition to this, it is the only way to achieve freedom. Because as long as you continue to be at odds with yourself, you will never feel like you belong anywhere in the modern world. To tell you the truth is that the majority of your pain has never been about what has occurred to you. Rather, it has been about the meaning you have built for it, the tales you have invented, the conclusions you have drawn, and the beliefs that you have formed. Your entire existence has been molded by those ideas, which you have not questioned and therefore have been unconscious. Certain beliefs, such as, I have to be strong in order to be loved. My needs are a burden. If I speak my truth, I will be rejected. If I stop performing, I will be abandoned, are examples of such beliefs. The wounds that are being described here are not facts. It is possible to cure wounds, but the healing process must be chosen. Your recovery cannot be compelled by anyone, and no one can save you. Despite the fact that this is the harsh reality, it is also the liberating reality, because it indicates that the power is yours. You are not required to wait for an apology, you are not required to wait for closure, and you do not need to wait for someone else to validate your experience prior to moving forward. You're able to make the decision right now to start feeling, to remember, and to come back. When you make that decision, something that has been dormant within you comes to the surface, a knowledge, a fire, a truth that declares, I will no longer betray myself. And from that fire, you blossom. Sometimes, rising does not appear to be what you had anticipated it would. There are times when it is not loud, and there are times when it wins. There are times when getting up appears to be the same as resting, as denying something, or as declining an opportunity because it will need you to put on a mask that you have already outgrown. As a result of the fact that their conception of love was constructed around the version of you that was unable of saying no, rising might sometimes appear like losing followers, friends, and family members. On the other hand, you are currently expressing a refusal, and this refusal is a precious affirmation of your truth, your limits, and your tranquility. Jungian psychologist Carl Jung once stated, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but when you do, when you finally surrender to your own becoming, you realize it's not terrifying. It's liberating. This is because there is nothing more powerful than a person who no longer fears being themselves. And once you have overcome your fear of yourself, you will no longer be terrified of the world, you will no longer be afraid of being rejected, and you will no longer be afraid of loss because you will have already overcome the most significant loss, the loss of your own voice. Furthermore, now that you have recaptured it, nothing from the outside world can exert the same influence over you. You walk with a different kind of posture than you were previously using. You do not exhibit arrogance or performativeness. Rather, you are sovereign, rooted, and complete. You are no longer timid in order to avoid being judged. You are no longer seeking to be understood by explaining yourself. When you want to be accepted, you no longer overgive. It dawns on you that your very presence is the present, and that your very existence is the sacrifice. If you're intended to be with certain individuals, they will not expect you to be anything other than who you are. This clarity will serve as your personal compass. Your eyes start to open up to new things. Now, the connections that you use to accept feel like they are suffocating you. There is a sense of emptiness in the chats that you used to enjoy. When you were once accustomed to the surroundings, they now feel poisonous. And it is impossible to undo the knowledge that you have acquired. Unfeeling what you've already felt is impossible, because you're unable to undo the misalignment, you decide to leave. This decision is not made out of cruelty, but rather out of integrity, because remaining would be costly for you, and you are no longer ready to shell out that amount of money. You begin to see that peace is not a state of being, rather, is a state of operation. To acquire it, one must have the bravery to confront the turmoil that exists within oneself and the conviction to not repeat it outside of oneself. Understanding when to talk and when to remain silent, when to hold and when to let go, when to fight and when to walk away are all essential components of this skill. Instead of living from hurting, it is living from the center. Not only do you construct a new universe for yourself, but you also create a new world for everyone else that you come into contact with. You turn into a reflection for other people, a permission slip, and a live example of what it means to prioritize completeness over performance with your actions. Even though you are not flawless, you are genuine. And in a world that is hooked to deception, the real means something revolutionary. Indeed, the old tales will make an attempt to come back. When you are exhausted, the voices will begin to disturb you. Habits will whisper to you when you're uncertain about something. However, you're not the same person you were before. Moreover, even if you fall, even if you forget, and even if you spiral for a moment, you will come back faster than you would have otherwise. To a greater extent, you will return. When you return, you will be more knowledgeable because you now have roots, and those roots are not planted in the validation of others. Rather, they are planted in the truth, in present, and in trusting yourself. Therefore, it is from that soil that your life starts to blossom. On the other hand, it is not flashy, it is not spectacular, and it is not always evident. There are times when it is as subtle as taking a full breath for the first time in years, as quiet as choosing to pause instead of reacting, and as gentle as placing your hand on your chest and whispering, "I've got you." These moments may appear to be insignificant, but they are seismic because they're the foundation of a life that feels like home. It's not because it's flawless. Rather, it's because it belongs to you without a doubt. Additionally, when you construct a life that is akin to a home within yourself, everything that is external to you undergoes a transformation. If something doesn't seem right, you stop pursuing after it. What is draining you is no longer tolerated by you. You give up trying to solve problems for those who are unwilling to change. It dawns on you that the only thing you need to do is maintain alignment. In addition, alignment is not a destination. Rather, it is a daily choice, 1,000 micro-decisions to maintain your connection to your center, to not desert yourself, even when it is unpleasant, especially when it is inconvenient. The reason for this is because the true test is not who you are when everything is simple, but rather who you are when things are difficult. When one's history starts knocking, the world becomes extremely loud. Are you able to maintain your grounding when the pressure increases? Are you able to maintain your composure? Are you able to maintain your integrity? Is it possible for you to select the version of yourself that does not strive for love, the one that does not look for opportunity to be chosen since she has already chosen herself? Here we are in the revolution. Self-possession is the new concept of power. It is not control or dominance that is being emphasized here. Therefore, performance is not a prerequisite for power. Rather, power is power. It was known to Jung. Instead of speaking of healing as a goal, he referred to it as a return, a descend, a confrontation, and a resurrection, not a more improved version of you, but of the most authentic version of yourself. Before the world came into existence, the one who told you who you should be. And now you are becoming her, not by doing more, but by finally doing less. This is what you're doing. Unlearning, letting go, remembering, and sitting in solitude for a sufficient amount of time to hear your own voice again are all ways to accomplish this. You discover everything you were looking for in other people, including love, safety, acceptance, and independence, when you listen to that voice. You are the only place where it ever existed. It was never out there. You have arrived at the point where everything begins. This is not the end. It is not the finish line. Rather, it is the beginning of a life that is lived in harmony with the truth, with the soul, and with completeness. A life that is no longer shaped by preconceived notions of who you should be, but rather by the person you actually are. Permission is no longer something you seek. When it comes to safety, you no longer shrink. It is no longer necessary for you to put on a mask in order to be liked, since you have finally arrived at the one place you were always intended to return to: yourself. In addition, you have discovered something that the rest of the world is unable to comprehend. Not your fame, not your success, not your image. Rather, it is something more profound, something ancient, and something immortal. Not the persona you cultivated, not the ego that sheltered you, and not the roles you played have been revealed to you. You have discovered the self. Wild, wise, and complete is the self. You were given the script by the self that existed before the world entered the picture. The part of yourself that is aware of who you are even when everything else does not matter. This is what Carl Jung referred to as the individuation process, which is the process of integrating all aspects of oneself, including the conscious and unconscious, the light and shadow, the ordinary and the unknown. It is not about changing into a different person. Rather, it is about learning to remember who you were before the world told you to forget things. It is about facing every unhealed pain, every buried belief, and every disowned part of you and saying, "You belong." This includes the parts of you that you were taught to despise, as well as the versions of yourself that made mistakes, as well as the shattered, confused, angry, and humiliated fragments, especially those. The reason for this is that those were never the issue. Rather, they were the guardians. They had been waiting for you to pay attention to them as messengers. Moreover, you are currently listening, and while you're doing so, something becomes different. When this happens, the neurological system starts to regulate itself, the mind starts to calm down, and the energy starts to flow. The feeling of life being less like something you have to exert control over and more like something you can rely on begins to emerge. Now that you have the ability to magnetize by frequency, you no longer need to manifest through force. You no longer seek love. Rather, you become love for yourself. You are no longer in pursuit of purpose. Rather, you are the embodiment of it. Mostly due to the fact that when you live on alignment, life begins to align around you. It indicates that life will become flawless. This means that you will no longer require it to be. Suddenly, you stop judging your value based on the results. Your identity is no longer dependent on how other people perceive you. In this moment, you come to the realization that your serenity was never intended to be contingent, that your value was never intended to be contingent on a transaction, and that your soul was never intended to be negotiated. And from that vantage point, even the challenging days do not have the ability to eradicate you because you no longer encounter them as someone who is helpless. You encounter them as a complete individual. It is not invulnerability that is meant by wholeness. Rather, it is acceptance of oneself. You are able to shed tears while maintaining your strength, meaning that you are able to experience terror while still moving forward. You are able to fall and still rise without feeling ashamed of yourself. This indicates that your existence is no longer a performance. Rather, it is a prayer, a presence, and a path, one that you alone are able to tread. Therefore, you're not walking it as someone who is looking for yourself. Rather, you are walking it as someone who is returning to themselves. And the return is the most important thing. It is the liberty, the awakening, and the healing that brings about the release. It is the moment when you stop looking at life and questioning, "Am I enough yet?" and begin to declare, "I am," not because of what you've accomplished or what you've conquered, but because you exist, because you are, and because the very fact that you're breathing is evidence that you belong. It is important that you take this to heart. You are not falling behind. You are not broken, and you are not on time. You have arrived spot on time. Even if it hurts, even if it is unclear, and even if the path that lies ahead is still concealed, you are exactly where your soul needs you to be. It is not about the destination that you're traveling to. Rather, it is about the person that you're while you are walking there. Even when it is difficult, even when it is lonely, and even when no one claps for it, especially when it is difficult, it is about choosing yourself over and over again. It is about presence. It is about truth. and it is about choosing yourself. It was in here, in your own heart, in the way that your spirit softens when you're honest, in the way that your body exhales when you stop pretending, and in the way that your life expands when you tell the truth. Because the praise that you were waiting for was never beyond your reach. In other words, that is the true reward. It is the true becoming. There is no one who can take that away from you, because it was not given to you by anyone. You're the one who gave it to yourself. So this is your time, not a high, not a peak, but a proclamation, a quiet, grounded, irreversible determination to no longer abandon yourself for love that costs too much, for belonging that demands silence, and for success that asks you to forget your name. This is your moment. At this point, it comes to an end, and at this point, it starts. It is at this point that you declare with every fiber of your being, I choose me. Rest is more important to me than rushing. I would rather have honesty than harmony. I prefer to have boundaries rather than approval. I would rather be alone than pretend to be connected. When it comes to performance, I prefer depth. I would rather have tranquility than proof. The way I choose to follow this path is to be totally awake, fully human, and fully alive. I choose love not as a performance, but as a presence. Mostly due to the fact that when you prioritize yourself above everything else, you eventually find yourself back at home.